Coach Olaf Prattle put the rep players through their paces on a damp Spears Point Park last night, and he indicated through his training techniques a willingness to play the match in the forwards. Boasting the current country front row of Todd Anderson, Richard Jones and Peter Malcolm, Prattle is confident that his big fellas will get on top early and be able to dominate the Central Coast pack. Last weekend in Foster, the Central Coast were beaten 32-13 by North Coast in a trial, and as a result 3 team changes have been made. For Newcastle, the country championship is most important to the continued development of the local competition now that the Knights are firmly entrenched. South Newcastle's Richard Jones will captain the side.
Cessnock Public School was shrouded in darkness today after PCB spills from fluorescent lights were found in the principal's office. Spills from lights had been found before, but no one had known what they were. Last year a ceiling fan had leaked, but because staff knew nothing about it, they weren't concerned. The school principal underwent blood tests earlier this week and has been on sick leave since. The assistant principal wouldn't elaborate on the matter. When we spoke to Brian Foote earlier this morning on the telephone, he was more than happy to talk to us about the PCB spills in the school. However, when we arrived at the school later in the day, he declined to speak to us, saying he was following orders and it was policy not to talk to us. A Department of Works employee was in the school today, replacing lights and carrying out safety checks. The department has been inundated with angry callers wanting lights replaced in schools immediately. Department of Works performs work in schools under orders from the Department of Education, and it's believed they're stretched to their manpower limits. Cliff Williams, Assistant Regional Director of the Department of Education, said today that all schools in the Hunter will be checked for PCB leaks within the next 3 to 4 months.
I have no idea why the capacitors are now starting to leak. I don't know whether it's through corrosion or whether it's through the environment. We just need to replace them. I'm sure the scientists will determine as soon as practicable why that's occurring, but a capacitor only has a set life period.
But in that light, that a capacitor only has a certain lifespan, how can you say 3 to 4 months is enough or 4 to 5 years to replace them is enough?
Well, I believe on the way that the capacitors are breaking down that we will be able to replace them in that time without a great deal of leakage.
But the parents and the teachers now are frightened to turn the lights on in the school and they're sitting in darkness. What can they do now? Well,
there is no evidence whatsoever that the lights being on or off is going to have any major effect on whether the capacitor will leak or not leak.
Based on that statement, it is difficult to imagine what one can believe when yesterday his boss, Alan Beard, said just the opposite.
I think that in the meantime, an appropriate response may be to leave the lights off while we examine them so that there's no worry about any liquid vaporising. That seems to be the main worry.
The PCBs have a mildly toxic effect, that they should be removed, as the Occupational Health and Safety have stated, and that they will be removed from schools in Hunter as soon as practicable.
If you could solve the problem any faster, would you?
Yes.
Why can't you?
Well, at this stage, we haven't identified the size of the problem. I'm guessing at 3 to 5 years. We appreciate that at the moment this is a controversial issue. It's an issue in which the public as a whole need to be aware of the problem, and they need to be aware of the plan to eradicate the problem. And so long as there is no crisis and no panic, then I think that's best handled at a central point.
It was the juniors' turn this morning to don the skirts, slip on the sand shoes and take to the courts to greet the new season. With the more senior players matching skills in the afternoon, President of the Newcastle Netball Association, Del Saunders, couldn't be happier with the position of the game in Newcastle.
It's really top, Mike, and we've got the support of all the people in the town, I'm sure. And of course, once again, the only reason we're playing today is because we're on these hard surface courts, which of course don't cause any problem to the council as far as trying to have maintenance done.
And what about the major teams this year? Who do you see as your winner of the A-grade premiership?
I wouldn't like to even hazard a guess because all the teams in A grade are extremely close. and it's anybody's guess at this stage who will take out the honours.
There will be plenty of chances for the better players to press for representative honours this season, and the first regional carnival is being held at Woy Woy tomorrow. But a group of players seem to enjoy themselves more than most today. Within the framework of the association are 8 intellectually handicapped teams set up a couple of years ago in a bold attempt to provide sport for everyone. With the help of Del Saunders and others, it's proved to be a resounding success. And the matches are played in a real competitive spirit, with everyone wanting to win. But nobody really minds if they don't, as playing and having fun is just as good.
Mr Morris was a special guest at the Port Waratah Works today, along with a large media contingent. Rod and Bar Division General Manager Rob Chenery said $430 million has been spent in the last 5 years upgrading the works equipment and systems. But now the area of human resources must be looked at to take BHP into the 1990s. Mr Chenery said integrated steelworks, like Newcastle's, must operate at peak production to be viable, and as well as producing international standard steel, must also give a 15% annual return on the shareholders' $5 billion investment. But the change needed from now on is not all on the workers, as Mr Chenery explained.
The old style of management is clock on at the gate and leave your brains at the gate and come in and we tell you what to do. That's certainly changing. In a lot of areas we aren't expecting employees to clock on, and we are expecting to come into work with their brains, and we need to fully utilise every ability there is in all our employees.
The Industrial Relations Minister, Mr Morris, took the opportunity to release his updated paper, Award Restructuring, the Task Ahead, following the April mini-budget. Mr Morris said $12 million is being made available under the government's workplace reform program.
That $12 million is to set up workplace resource centres that will sell advice to industry on how to rearrange their job practices, how to rearrange the way they do things at work, how to rearrange and cope with the process of broadening out the range of activities that employers can carry out, and all of it designed to do 3 things: to lift productivity, to lift efficiency, and to enable Australian industry to become more competitive. And that's precisely what BHP is doing here in our own region at this time.
Newcastle Harbour was idle for the duration of the 4-hour-long meeting at the Workers' Club. One recommendation of the Commission is that the Waterside Workers' Federation should be excluded from bulk cargo handling. This would affect Newcastle more than any other port, with its high percentage of bulk coal and grain exports. Such a move would place in jeopardy the very existence of the Federation. So both branches of the union in Newcastle, the Cranes and the General branches, got together for the first time ever to address this challenge to the union's coverage. Waterside Workers' Federation General Secretary Taz Bull said the Newcastle meeting was an early one in a series to be held around the country.
We were pleased that in the face of this fairly serious challenge to our coverage, that the membership of both groups, who had historically seen each other as friends but not necessarily directly linked, should have seen fit to meet together as they did. The other important question dealt with today concerned amalgamation with the Seamen's Union. Our 2 unions have worked together for 100 years or so, but again, in the face of the current difficult times, the decision has been taken to amalgamate.
The Knights will be back at the ISC for only their 3rd home game this year and are determined to stop a hat-trick of losses. The 2 New Guineans were dropped from the squad last night, and Knights Chief Executive Graham Hards says a number of factors were considered by the selectors before they made their decision.
Well, firstly, Diary Cove is injured and will not play this weekend. Arnold's back in reserve grade. They're bringing them up to give them experience, and I'm sure that we'll see them back in first grade before the season finishes.
The axing of the two wingers has left the door open for Tony Kemp and Glenn Frendo to return to the first grade lineup. Kemp is itching for some first grade action after weeks of deliberation over his court case against the New Zealand Rugby League. That finally cleared him to play for the Knights. Frendo is keen to return after being relegated to reserve grade for the past few weeks. Meanwhile, Knights officials are hoping Glenn Miller can stay on the field for a full 80 minutes this week after he was sent from the field against Brisbane after a confrontation with Wally Lewis. Saturday's sin binning was the second such incident in as many weeks, and a trend that Mr Hard says will be eliminated from his game.
We're certainly hoping that he'll see out the full 80 minutes this week. It's very difficult to beat top sides when you're playing short of men. I'm sure that it won't happen this weekend.
The fire was first noticed around 6 o'clock last night by a mine official, shortly after alarm monitors activated when they detected carbon monoxide gas. Everybody was evacuated from the mine safely and mine inspectors were quickly on the scene. Chief Executive Officer of Elcom Mines, Bob Williams, says reports from workers indicate the fire began during normal procedures.
That roof caved, which is the normal thing that occurs in a coal mine operation, and during the course of that caving we assume it has ignited some methane gas, which continues to burn.
The problem for mine officials lies in the area that the fire has broken out in. It's been isolated but is inaccessible for firefighters. While millions of dollars worth of equipment still remains in the mine, safety officers have decided to flood the pocket that the fire is in. To help with the flooding process, a drilling rig was flown in late this afternoon to begin boring a hole into the mine near the shores of Budgewoi Lake. Water from the lake will then be pumped into the mine. A skeleton crew will be left on duty at the mine face in case of an explosion to assist in closing the mine off completely. Mr Williams says while the mine is out of service, miners from Munmora mine will be rostered to other duties.
We will allocate them to temporary work at our other 6 mines in the area, and hopefully with the cooperation of the unions they'll be successfully employed at those mines while we recover this mine, and then hopefully everyone will come back and work here in the not too distant future.
While the Department of Education is busy overhauling public schools in the Hunter area, there seems little the average person can do to identify PCB capacitors or know how to dispose of them. When Peter Bright, an Edgeworth security guard, began to dismantle his pool and pump when the motor seized, he found much more than he bargained for: a possible PCB leakage.
I ended up pulling it apart and discovered that this cylinder sitting on top of it was leaking really bad. I had a smell of it because I was pretty close to it when I was working with it, and I got very bad migraine headaches and started to feel a bit woozy in the stomach.
What did the liquid look like?
Like a clear, runny sort of water liquid, and by the looks of that, it's something like battery acid.
He wanted advice on the problem. Newcastle Consumers Affairs said it's an area we're not familiar with. We want people to report any cases, and then added Sydney is handling the problem. The Health Department advised Peter to put the capacitor in a plastic bag, but neglected to tell him what to do with it after that. The Department of Public Works said they were involved with schools, not consumers, while the Electricity Commission offered handling and disposal advice, but said they couldn't really do anything more. We spoke to the State Pollution Control Commission. If someone finds a capacitor containing PCB, what can they do?
The best thing to do is to place that in an area in your backyard, obtain yourself a new pair of plastic gloves and carefully remove the capacitor, place it inside a plastic bag and then put the gloves with it, seal the plastic bag and place it with your garbage.
Eventually, Peter Bright phoned a local electrical contractor, Alan Burgess. He was unable to identify whether the capacitor contained PCB or not. He said no authority had informed him about PCB, and all he could really do was follow instructions he'd heard via media reports and replace the capacitor.
It was official weigh-in and medical checks this afternoon in readiness for tonight's fight night at the Boys Club, the first such night for many years. Over 100 youngsters ranging from 10 to 21 years of age will compete in all weight divisions over 3 rounds. Dr Summers looked into the physical conditions of the aspiring Fenix, while others registered the fighters and checked their official weights. Newcastle's Australian junior bantamweight champion Lance Hobson, a product of the club, will be the main feature tonight when he meets Travern Hooper from Queensland in a non-title bout. Troy Waters will be the guest of the club and the first fight gets underway at 7 p.m.
Local four-wheel drive clubs combined to form the Hunter Regional Four-Wheel Drive Council to clean up pollution across the area's beaches. 70 vehicles and 200 people swarmed over the dunes, collecting glass, plastic and rusted junk washed up on the shore. The Air Force joined in, providing 8 men and a bomb disposal expert in case any military ordinances were found. The Port Stephen Shire Council lent assistance by providing garbage bags and dumper bins. Despite the inclement weather, the clean-up was considered a great success and is set to become an annual event. Both sides settled down early in the match, sliding into tackles and diving for the loose ball in the slippery wet conditions. Australs were first to score after the half-time break off the boot of Brett Porter. Minutes later, Porter scored again with one of the easiest goals, with a penalty in front from an indiscretion in back play that saw Sutherland reduced to 10 men. It couldn't have been a better return to first grade for Porter, who's been sidelined for weeks through injury. Late in the half, an Australs English bye, Kevin Shell, pounded another one into the back of the net to take the score to 3-0. Today's win hopefully is the sign that the Australs are back on the track and on the way to recapturing their pre-season form, where they won 5 straight games.
Australians identify Anzac Day with parades, but it's fair to say they identify with this just as easily. After 2 centuries in illegal shadowland, 2-up is now legit. At least it is in this state on this one day of the year. For decades, 2-up was the symbol of Anzac anti-authoritarianism and rebellion. Now, thanks to government legislation, it's been given respectability, subject to strict conditions.
It's not open slow, you can't just go out and play 2-up on every corner. There are a couple of provisos.
Right, so it's certainly not a way to make quick money either.
Definitely not, no, that's one of the provisos. Anyone who is contemplating making money out of the game could finish up in big trouble.
What has to be done with proceeds?
Proceeds have got to go to a charity, a charitable organisation, and it's got to be seen to be going there, it's got to be accounted for correctly.
Despite that conditional legality, the game, also known as the school, has attracted plenty of newcomers today at the Newcastle RSL, ready to have a spin.
We've got a centre bet. Centre bet is always bets heads. We cover the centre, then they take the side bets, and from there on in, come in spinner, up he goes, and away we go. He's got to throw then 3 heads in a row. He can then remove the bet from the centre. Once he's done that, he can either spin again or we get another spinner. It's the fairest game in the world. About time it was legalised.
In Australia, a game called pitch and toss was played virtually from the arrival of the first fleet. But in 1867, 3 men were acquitted on a charge relating to a game of 3-up, and since then, police have faced a quandary. Until now, police had 2 options: either break up the game and face the withering accusation of being un-Australian, or look the other way. Being good Aussies, they tended towards the latter.
We knew the old digger, liked to play this type of game on Anzac Day, and we always felt that we would please them, and we sort of looked the other way.
So now the last symbol of digger defiance is officially an institution. But there's more than one patron of the school who regrets the change.
In a sense, it has taken some of the pressure off us, but I think also it's taken a bit of the thrill out of the game also at the same time.
$10 on the centre. Centre set. 10 on tails. Come on, you got tails. 10 on heads. $20. Side bet set.
Every man, woman and child who in those scripture lessons
for their deeds and sacrifice.
It's National Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and the forum attracted almost 200 people. Although victims were invited, most of those who came represented groups and organisations which help victims of violence. Lynn Rogers, with the Sydney Community Legal Centre, says domestic violence can be either physical or psychological.
How high is the incidence of domestic violence?
It's 3 in 10 across Australia, so you can assume that that is the reality in your community as well.
She says refuges and legal and crisis intervention services can help, but there are never enough. She says the Hunter needs more facilities for victims, despite new laws which give greater protection. Any woman can ask the court for a domestic violence order if she has been threatened, molested, harassed or attacked. The court can also be asked to take firearms away from the attacker. The incidence of domestic violence is increasing across the Hunter and the state, and attempts are being made to make people aware of the severity of the problem.
In 1968 to 81, 23.2% of homicides related from domestic violence. No doubt, current days, this figure has probably increased.
While the majority of cases involve attacks on women or children, he says men are also victims of domestic violence. More often, though, it's believed women stay in bad situations because they have no money or other accommodation, and they are concerned for their children. In Belmont, a court support group is being established to tell people what to expect if charges are laid against an attacker, and victims are urged to speak out.
If you break the silence, you expose the violence and therefore diminish the power which is prevalent in all situations of domestic violence. It is very important for people to tell what is really happening.